What's up guys, and welcome back to more Reddit stories about entitled people, crazy people, and all that kind of stuff. So as usual, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more Reddit content, and let's get into today's stories. You want to try to take 9 inches of our property? We will take 20 feet of yours. We have lived in our house for about 8 years in a neighborhood in Arizona. It's a small, rural neighborhood in the mountains. All the houses are 3 to 5 acre horse properties. The roads are all dirt and unmaintained. It used to be a very understandable place to live, but in the last few years it has been developed and property values have been going up, quadrupling since we moved here in 2016. This has attracted a crowd of people who care what yards look like who simply weren't here when this was cheap. The neighbor is one of these new people. We moved here specifically because the neighborhood has a bunch of messy yards already, and we wanted to also have lenient neighbors. We lived in harmony with our neighbors' junky yards for years. About a year ago, this dude from California bought the lot next to us and threw a fit about the stuff we had on the property line. The neighbor introduced himself by calling the county on a bunch of us anonymously. We knew he called on us because he was bragging about calling the county on several of the other neighbors for their messy yard. So whether he intentionally included us in the report or not, he brought the inspectors to the neighborhood. The neighbor came onto our property by at least 40 feet, since there was no fence at the time, to closely examine our piles of scrap metal. We caught this on camera and confronted him in text. It turned out he was very angry that he had purchased land next to a pseudo scrapyard. We had several cars in various stages of disassembly and piles of materials. Keep in mind, this is the country. This is normal out here. We're on 5-acre lots. Another detail to point out is that he isn't even living on this lot next to us. He bought a lot with a very small cabin 3 houses down, along with the lot next to us, with the intention of turning it into an income property. We had a single fence pole vaguely where the property line was. We hadn't had any sort of land survey done. It was supposed to just be a temporary marker, but became a permanent marker. Dude was absolutely livid that we had vehicles parked, quote, on his property. The very tip of one of our cars was touching the established boundary. He threatened to have our vehicle towed, so we simply had an actual land survey done, and it turned out the property line was a good 20 feet into his property. Homeboy should have just let sleeping dogs lie and not been an asshole about a few inches. After we confronted him in text, he confronted us in person in our front yard, leaning against our no trespassing sign and screaming obscenities at us. We haven't seen him ever since we saw him on our security camera observing the new survey markers, dismayed. It's entirely possible that we entirely chased him out of the neighborhood. The people on the other side of his lot, who have an equally trashed yard from their small-scale pig farming operation that he should have known existed before buying the land, had such a bad experience with him that she had a restraining order on him. They are also having a potentially equally funny dispute about a shed that she built fully on his lot over 15 years ago, which means they're going to have to go to court over who now owns it, and our adverse possession laws are certainly on her side. Currently, we are building an ugly fence on the newly surveyed property line. Buyer drove 50 miles to lowball in person, sent them packing. I'm selling this piece of furniture at half the market price on Facebook Marketplace. This dude legit just drove 50 plus miles each way, scheduled a time, and made the 1-hour drive this morning. He spent more on gas, drove a pickup truck than he was willing to offer. Oh, it's for a friend. I don't know if it's the right size and they aren't picking up, he says as we stand in the parking lot and time passes by. I say, well, if your friend looked at the photos and description, they know exactly what they're getting. Oh, I just can't take the risk on it. I could only do 1/3 of asking price, he said. Sorry, I can't do that. Other buyers are interested at asking price. Okay, well, 1/3 is best I can do. Alright, have a safe drive back, I say as I pick up the furniture piece. The buyer is visibly shocked, like the strategy has always worked before. Some people even schedule for 8 a.m., then show up and peruse it for 20 minutes, just to end up leaving, when dimensions and many photos are provided on the listing. Sprained ankle. Boss wanted a doctor's note to pay 1 day of sick time. Now he's paying a week. I twisted and sprained my ankle Monday morning packing up our camp from Labor Day weekend. Having done this a few times in the past, I didn't want to bother to have it checked out. Who wants to pay $1,000 for urgent care to tell you to rest and ice it? Yay, America. So I went to work Tuesday. I got morning stuff done and explained the situation to my boss. Told him I'd need to take the day because it was swollen and painful, and I needed to rest and be off of it in order for it to heal. He gets in a tizzy because God forbid anyone needs to miss work for anything at all ever, and snaps at me for not planning to go to the doctor. Wednesday I go into work, still limping and still wearing improper footwear. I can only fit the injured foot into a crock without unbearable pain. The first thing the boss says is, "Don't you think you should get that checked out? I don't understand why you don't want to just pay for it." I explain again that I've had this injury in the past. It's definitely not broken and honestly not even as swollen as it has been when I've done it before. I want to be at work and keep up on things and make everyone's job less difficult. I would just need to take it easy for a couple days, which isn't a problem, considering I can do 90% of my job from my desk, and the 10% slack is beyond easy for everyone to pick up, especially when not being there makes them pick up 100% of it. This gets met with more attitude, so I ask if I'll be getting paid sick time for the day I missed yesterday. He says no, not without a doctor's note. You can visibly see the injury clear as day, and I'm trying here, so what the hell? I'm fed up by this point, so a little later on I say okay, and leave to go to the doctor's for the note he wants so badly, knowing full well what they'll say to treat it, and that I'll need to be off of it for 3 to 5 days. After an x-ray and getting the "yup, it's sprained, keep doing what you've been doing," I let them know my boss asked for a note for missing a day of work to rest it. Doc asks if I want to be at work to do what I can and stay off of it as best as possible. I said that's what I've been trying to do, so I'm fine with that. But I do have sick time if it would be more beneficial to be off of it for a couple days. She comes back with a note that I may return to work on September 9th, which would be Monday. I took a picture and shot it over to Boss Man, just the photo. He replies, "What's wrong with ankle?" Which I met with no response, considering none is needed. He got his note. I just wanted a day of sick time, 8 hours. Now he's paying me 4 days, 32 hours. He can't refuse a second of it. Edit to add, I have an HSA and I'm on a high deductible health plan by choice. I'm not losing any real money in this situation, and it was well worth the price either way. The time my mother-in-law wouldn't call an ambulance for her daughter. I'm going to say here and now that my mother-in-law doesn't like any of her children. I'll refer to the youngest child, my boyfriend's sister, as the golden child because she is the one she seems to dislike the least. And now that we've gotten that out of the way, I'm going to tell you about the time mother-in-law wouldn't call an ambulance for golden child. This happened way back when I had only been dating my boyfriend for about 5 to 6 months. At that time, I was starting to realize that mother-in-law wasn't, well, a normal mother. I was shocked at the way she treated the kids and dealt with different situations, but I couldn't really stop her from behaving like she did. But this incident took it to a whole new level. One day, golden child had an asthma attack. Obviously, we needed to call an ambulance out for her, or at least call 111 for advice. But mother-in-law refused to do this. The reason? I quote, "No, I'm not having a load of paramedics trek through the house when it's an absolute pigsty." Yes, she refused to call an ambulance for her daughter, even though she was potentially dying, because she thought the house was messy and she didn't want the paramedics to see. My boyfriend raged at her like I'd never seen before. She started shouting, screaming, and throwing things around, in the most epic temper tantrum I'd ever seen an adult throw at that point in my life. She screamed that everyone was being mean to her and she didn't deserve any of the things that people did to her and blah blah blah. Then, in the most childish and disgraceful move I've ever witnessed, she disconnected the house phone and took everyone's mobiles. I didn't own one at the time, in case we tried to call an ambulance behind her back. I tell you what, folks, I had never ever been so utterly appalled and disgusted. This made me see her in a whole new light. Gone was the slightly off-kilter, wacky woman who raised her kids on false hopes and questionable morals. In her place was an extremely self-centered, selfish, oversized toddler with no concern for her children and highly messed up priorities. I don't even know why I even agreed to stay overnight in that house after that incident. My boyfriend couldn't apologize enough on her behalf, like it was all his fault that that had happened, which it certainly wasn't, and I don't even know why he would even think that. Golden child recovered from the attack, but she wasn't the same for weeks afterwards. She stayed in her room most of the time, used her inhaler excessively, and barely spoke a word. Entitled person trespasses, suffers my wrath. I rent a building in a small rural downtown. I work alone in the back of the building and keep the front door unlocked because I ship products and get deliveries. I have cameras and a Ring doorbell and many signs saying no soliciting, delivery entrance only, private building, do not enter. Basically, stay the F out. Do these deterrents work? Apparently not. I'm in my office on the phone and I hear the alarm. Look at the camera. Some guy walks in. I head up front and he starts babbling about needing keys for his storage room. I said, "Why are you asking me?" He said, "You own the building." I told him I rent. I can't help you, sorry. He kept talking and asking me where I thought he could get a key. He asked for the landlord's phone number. I went to my office to get it and come back to find him wandering around my warehouse. He said, "I almost tripped on those shoes," and points to my chucks I had kicked off. "You shouldn't leave them there," he said. Okay, now I'm getting pissed. I told him it was my building. I was the only one who was ever in here and I can put my shoes wherever I want. You ignored my signs and just came in. He starts to whine about the keys again. I tell him he needs to leave. I'm busy. Finally, the entitlement of that old man. End of the story? Nope. Next day he is back. I hear the alarm and there he is. Starts kicking up a fuss because he called all day and left a bunch of messages for my landlord and no one called him back. I told him, "This has nothing to do with me. Why are you here?" He said, "You better tell them to call me. I will sue them. You call them now and tell them." I head towards him, yelling to get the F out. How dare you trespass in my place of work and tell me what to do? He hauled ass out of there. He was out the door and down the street. The effing nerve. Anyway, friends, that's going to be it for today's stories. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe as well for more Reddit stories. So take care and I'll see you next time.